You're listening to the Current Reality Podcast, where we talk about staying anchored in biblical reality within the current of modern culture. I am Michael Cleary. With me is Wade Thomas, and we are with Christ the King Church in Cincinnati, Ohio, which makes this podcast possible.
Might be the last time you say Cincinnati, Ohio.
I know. Yeah, that's weird. And so there's a listener, you may or may not be aware.
We're moving to D.C. We just got appointed to the Doge.
We will be in the president's cabinet. Mm-hmm. No, we won't. In fact, even better, we have some exciting news that we've been working towards, praying about, kind of anticipating for a while. But as these things go, it takes a long time to actually get to the point where you could say, we've crossed the finish line and the good thing is here, but now we can. So this is a little bittersweet today because this episode we're recording right now may be the final one that we record in our beautiful and luxurious world headquarters of King's Domain.
It's basically like Trump Tower. If you've never seen a picture of this thing.
Well, I mean, I'm looking out, the window into the vestibule at the moment, and there's the fountain, and of course it's all lined with gold. And
there are like Greco-Roman style statues of us just on either side of the giant Roman arched door.
We each have a personal butler to bring us tea or whatever snack we prefer while we're recording this.
It's a nice building, but it's not anything like that.
I mean, we're grateful for the building we're in. And the building we're in is great.
Yeah.
I mean, I really love this building. It's just too small for our needs.
We've had people sitting in our basement on rotation by small groups on Sunday mornings for 3 months or something, right?
Since September.
So
5 months.
Yeah.
Is that like September?
And this past Sunday was just one of several where I've noticed, I was like, they literally, if I invited them all upstairs, they would almost all have to stand. Like the sanctuary was filled plus, 30-ish people or something downstairs. We just can't.
Yeah, so in our current building, great building, our church has outgrown it. And we've been feeling this pinch for a while, but so we've been searching for a new building, and we found this place, and this has been a long time coming. I mean, this time a year ago, I had a general vague sense that the church needed to move to a bigger place, but I didn't really know where. But I'd been praying for a while about northern Kentucky, which is right across the river from us here in Cincinnati. And I thought northern Kentucky, there's a little bit more space, and the demographics suit our ministry style and philosophy. And a lot of our growth, pretty much all of our growth, has come from Kentucky in the last couple of years. And so it just seemed like this is an opportunity to consider northern Kentucky. But I was really nervous about how the church would respond to it.
But probably worth saying real quick, demographics, we're talking families with children, basically, who want to pass along the faith.
Yeah, so we're in a collegiate neighborhood.
Yeah.
So like we're 5-6 blocks from the University of Cincinnati, where upwards of 40,000 college students attend college. But it's just funny because like in this tucked away collegiate neighborhood with, students all around us, on Sunday morning, you have these vans with, very large families. By van, I don't mean like a Odyssey.
No, you mean like the 12-passenger, 15-passenger.
Yeah, we have big families. Yeah. And that's not all of them, but there's a number of them. And some of them drive from, 45 minutes or more to get to church. And they drive into the inner city of Cincinnati to a church in a collegiate neighborhood to worship because we're the church that best aligns with their values. And so as much as we love the college neighborhood and the Lord has blessed our ministry here, it is just very evident that we need to be in a place where we have better access and proximity to the people that are most receptive to our message.
Right.
And we want to build something that lasts for 100 years. Because, over the last 10 years or so, 15 years since we started, a pattern that's played out a number of times is people will join our church, maybe meet their future husband or wife at our church, get married, and then by the time the first kid comes along, gets maybe 3 or 4 years old, they're thinking we got to move out further into the suburbs and that kind of area where we'll have resources to raise our family better. Mm-hmm. And we always see that coming, and that's always been a lamentable part of our ministry. But now we'll be closer to them. And what's really cool that, the church was very supportive and unifying whenever we first suggested, hey, we may need to move across the river. But the cool thing is that the place that we found, I was worried it may be like half an hour away, 25 minutes away just to find a place. The place is right across the river. And so for the people in Ohio, it's the same distance, more or less, within 5 minutes tops.
Yeah.
It'll be the same distance to commute just to cross. They have to cross a bridge to get to church, but they're not adding time because our new place is right off the highway, and it's a big 28,000 square foot building. There's 4.5 acres of land, but it's really close to the downtown area. So it's ideal in so many ways, and we're incredibly thankful for it. We'll be moving our King's Domain studio there, and we have a nice room that we can set up that is dedicated as a studio. And our hope is to add video. I'd like to add video to this podcast.
We'll see if people agree once the video starts, and they're like, now
they're
they see
oh,
what we
that's
look
what
like.
Wade
That's
looks
what
like.
they look like. Yeah, But hey, we can try it.
We'll try it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a podcast watcher. I know some people will watch a Joe Rogan or a Tucker Carlson podcast.
I don't sit down and watch it like I'm going to watch a movie.
Yeah.
But I'll play them sometimes, like while I'm working or whatever. And periodically I will look. And especially like I know John Harris back in the day, it seemed like he would have slides and visuals and stuff.
Yeah.
And so sometimes at my old job when I was still, at a 9-to-5 non-church job, I would have his stuff on and maybe just periodically look at whatever graphic he had up. I mean, that's cool. It is a use for it.
Yeah.
For sure.
For me, I just can't sit still. I can't sit still and watch a guy talking or two guys talking.
Yeah.
I know some people do. And if you do, we are about to accommodate your desire because you will get to look at the two of us.
Right.
And we're not exactly, Hollywood models, but but if it helps to see the nonverbals and the facial expressions and whatnot, you can see that whenever we get the video lined up. It'll take some time to do that. But the other thing that's tied to that is, so we've done 2 King's Domain conferences before, and we've done them in this building. And whenever we've done it, whenever we did our planning sessions and we whiteboarded out, the question has always been, all right, so if we have a bunch of people who's never been here before and they have to park here.
Yeah, it's a nightmare.
They don't know the neighborhood. I mean, our members of our church, they know where to go. But people who are, they've never been here before, coming in from out of town, many of them don't know where to go. So parking and stuff has always been an issue.
Because it's not even like, if you were in like downtown Indy when we went to the convention, the Southern Baptist Convention, there's like parking garages and parking lots everywhere nearby.
Yeah.
But here, we're not in like the heart of downtown. We're in this 100-year-old college neighborhood. So like you literally just have to like either find a spot on the street or park at a park or some other place we have an arrangement with. Yeah. It's pretty messed up.
We've got 25 spaces, give or take, in our parking lot. And so we have one lot dedicated for families with little children and then a few spaces for visitors, a handful for everybody else. And then if you don't get one of those spaces, then street parking, one of these other options. And so that's been something we got this building in 2012, so it's been 13 years. For 13 years, that has been a key feature. And even the size of our building, the way it's laid out, it has determined ministry priorities in ways that I don't want to surrender our ministry priorities and philosophy to architecture, but that's been the reality. So moving into our new space, we can have a larger conference. I'm really pumped about our King's Domain conference this year, May 8th to 10th, May 8th through the 10th this year. And we just added C.R. Wiley to the speaker lineup.
Which, I mean, I can't speak highly enough of him. Over the years, he's really been a big help to me. So.
Yeah, me too. So we'll have...
I mean, I don't know him. I don't want people to get the impression because I said that like he doesn't know who I am. But I mean, like from a distance, he's been a blessing to me.
Yeah, with all these guys, I'm casually acquainted. But it's the only one I would say I'm pretty close with David Schrock. I'm very close with Michael Foster.
Well, yeah, you guys have known each other. Yeah, better part of 2 decades, I guess.
Yeah, I've known Michael a really long time. But we have Jeff Durbin, Michael Foster, Tom Askell, David Schrock, C.R. Wiley, Joe Rigney. Joe Rigney, and myself. So it'll be seven keynotes. And in this new building, we weren't able to do breakouts in the previous years, but now you can have more opportunities to hear from the keynote guys, and I think that'll be a really big benefit too. So I'm super pumped about it. If you're interested in that, the title is futureproofchristianity.com. Oh, am I boring you, Wade?
No, sorry, I yawned. You didn't know because
you don't have video. You could have seen Wade has a new adopted daughter, so he's got extra children in the home.
No, and it didn't affect my sleep, but it did affect my morning. This morning she had appointments, and so I was watching the other 6 while she was at an appointment. Several appointments. Anyway,
another big answer to prayer that
it is,
but she's home now.
But yeah, the new building will provide a lot more. So I think it's the kind of if you had just heard the names that Michael mentioned, and you knew those names, the church building God's allowed us to purchase and that we're moving into is the kind of church you'd probably expect. Whereas if we were doing it here again for the third time, you probably would have gotten here and been like, oh, this seems smaller and is harder to get to than I would have thought for a conference that had that level of participation in it. So,
yeah, but I mean, the speakers are outstanding. I would listen to these guys, discuss rugby football rules,
Yeah, I mean, me too. I've Christ Overall. That's been really helpful to me over the last couple of months.
David Schrock, he writes for them.
Yeah, David Schrock's. Did he found it? Does he?
I don't. I know he
seems to be a big player in it.
Yeah, he's an editor, some kind of an editor. So Stephen Wellham is. I don't know who founded it, but David Schrock and Stephen Wellham are two guys that I know that are in it. I don't know the other guys personally. I'm just kind of familiar with their names.
Yeah.
Stephen Wellham is one of my favorite profs at Southern
Progressive
Seminary.
Covenantalism. I'm reading him on Progressive Covenantalism.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
That's you have to let me know your thoughts
on his James
when you get to the end of it.
But yeah, so the new building will be great. And I think even aside from the breakouts and potential, I think just the layout of the building, it's very comforting. It's very inviting. You'll come into it and if you're bringing kids with you or something, you'll be plenty of parking, a very warm, inviting building with a lot of, just plenty of bathrooms, plenty of amenities available. Like it's a
racquetball
courts.
Kidding.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. I'm excited to see our first one there. And I should say, because you say this all the time, and I did not, and shame on me for it, we do thank God for this building. Like, God provided big in giving us this building.
Oh, yeah.
It's just clear he has said, I mean, just providentially, you can't fit here anymore. I'm sending you tons of people from across the river, so go looking.
Yeah.
And then he made this next one.
Well, even the process of leaving this building was not done hastily or in a haphazard manner. It was very deliberate, prayerful, slow, and as they say, God's fingerprints were all over it.
Yeah,
it was very
obvious.
evident to me that this was a move of God to bring us here. So yeah, we're incredibly grateful. And so lots of winning. And speaking of lots of winning, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about even more winning.
So President Trump won the election. This time, both in the popular vote and the Electoral College. So there's really no...
Did he really win, though? Did he really?
Yes, he did. He did handily. And so what I want to talk through here is basically I'll give you the bumper sticker, lay of the land, one sentence summary, and then we'll work through it. President Trump is imperfect, most disappointingly on abortion, but a second term for him is far better than a first term for Kamala Harris. And most of our listeners probably, and by the way, if there's any liberals listening, great, happy to have you here. I'm really not going to try to persuade you of anything because I'm going to assume you're totally closed off to anything I say. So I'm just talking to people like us, regular Bible believing Christians who probably almost certainly voted for Donald Trump if they voted. It's important. So what I said it may sound plain, so plainly obvious that you're like, why even say it? But I think there's reasons to celebrate and reasons to be grateful for him that are worth exploring. And there's the thing about abortion and homosexuality in particular that it is worth standing firm on, especially abortion. The president, his role in homosexuality is going to be fairly limited, but his role with abortion need not be. And it shouldn't be. I mean, President Trump said before the election that he would veto an abortion ban. He should not have said that. He should not do it. And we want to talk about it. So being a sycophant for President Trump is never going to be helpful. But by the same token, sitting in sackcloth and ashes because he is imperfect and because he's wrong on something that matters a lot, but right on many other things, that's also not the answer. So we want to appropriately celebrate, appropriately work, appropriately keep pushing on him as much as we can and on the Republican Party to get right all the way right on abortion.
I'll just interject this here.
Yeah.
When he was first elected in 2016, there was right after the results were announced, there was a reflex that I had that kind of gave me an indicator that my thoughts and my feelings weren't quite aligned. In my thoughts, I felt sort of obligated to say, well, Trump is a horrible guy, and I voted, and I did vote third party. we can talk about this some other time, but I did vote third party in 2016 because I didn't believe him. I didn't believe that he was who he claimed to be. I'm like, this guy's
which was a reasonable position in 2016.
Yeah.
I mean, he hadn't done anything yet. He'd never been elected to anything.
But after he was announced, I was like, I feel excited. It really, that was a strange thing for me because I felt like I was betraying myself in a way because I was trying to convince myself of something. And so I'll just say right out of the gate now that I was an enthusiastic supporter of Donald Trump in this election. Mm-hmm. And that is, there needs to be some delineation between being a sycophant and being a realistic yet hopeful, enthusiastic supporter of Trump. And so I supported him enthusiastically despite the flaws that we will discuss here. And I've talked about this. I've recorded a video about it and wrote about it. That's no surprise. But I think if there is the danger that I think some people would worry about is that Christians are so Team Trump that they would kind of defile their consciences and go along with whatever he says. That is not at all. I think neither Wade nor I, we are not interested in just whatever Trump says is gospel.
Right.
However, I do want to push back on this sense of because of Trump's flaws that we have to, act like miserable and horrible and lament. And that was more what I was inclined to do in 2016. I see the error of that now.
Yeah. No, that's right. So that posture is mine. That mirrors my own. So let's walk through them. All right. So President Trump, the reasons why a second term for him is far better than a first term for Kamala Harris. And these are just ones that I've selected. Obviously, you could say more or potentially reprioritize these or quibble with these, but let's work through them. First, President Trump is at least hospitable to those of us who pray and work and fight to end legal abortion. That is not good enough for us to be satisfied, but it is better than the alternative. So you cannot oppose abortion at all. You cannot want legal restrictions of any kind on abortion at all and be anything but the most obscure, probably locally elected Democrat. I mean, you could not be anything of significance in the Democratic Party and want any restrictions on abortion at all. And of course, I know I already hear some Republicans, or not some Republicans, some conservatives who disagree and maybe did not vote for President Trump. I can hear them probably saying, "Well, President Trump has shifted our party to the left on abortion too," and I think that's probably true. Either he or his administration certainly has, but I can't. There's not another option. Obviously, I understand you can literally vote for a third party, but this is not a parliamentary system. They're not going to get elected to the presidency. And so to be the chief executive, I had two options. One, whose party and who herself would want no legal restrictions of any kind on abortion, and the other who appointed Supreme Court justices who overturned Roe v. Wade and does want some legal restrictions on abortion. To me, that choice is obvious.
Well, Kamala Harris, that was her campaign issue.
Yeah.
She ran on abortion, not like even the way you presented it was charitable towards her, which is she would not allow any restrictions, which is certainly true. But she was openly in favor of and celebrating abortion as though it is a good thing that must continue. I mean, gone are the days of safe, legal, and rare being the descriptor of abortion. That was what Bill Clinton said back in the 90s.
She wants it to be safe, celebrated, and common.
That's right. All over the place.
Safe for the woman, and not for the baby. Yeah. It's very ironic to call a procedure in which a human being is chopped up or poisoned and then suctioned out with a vacuum cleaner. It's very ironic to call that safe. Yeah. Not to mention it's not safe for the woman either. But
right, yeah, it's not. I mean, there are health consequences and complications of abortion.
So there you go. So and here's something to keep in mind also as far as abortion. Those of us who want to see legal abortion, totally abolished worldwide, we have a voice. I mean, not me personally, but guys who hold that position have a seat at President Trump's table of advisors. You'll have no such seat with any Democrat of any note in the United States of America. So that's one reason. Second reason, President Trump, or at the very least, some of those who influence him, appear to know some of the LGBTQ nonsense that's invaded our culture so violently in the last decade or so is crazy. Some of those who are in his world, if not him himself, appear to know that that stuff is crazy. Here's from his executive order proclaiming that there are only two sexes. This is from President Trump's executive order that he signed. I believe this one was signed the day of the inauguration. Quote, across the country, ideologues who deny the biological reality of sex have increasingly used legal and socially coercive means to permit men to self-identify as women and gain access to intimate single-sex spaces and activities designed for women, from women's domestic abuse shelters to women's workplace showers. This is wrong. I love that three-word sentence right in the middle. This is wrong. That's fantastic. Plain spoken, absolutely true. Efforts to eradicate the biological reality of sex fundamentally attack women by depriving them of their dignity, safety, and well-being. The erasure of sex in language and policy has a corrosive impact not just on women, but on the validity of the entire American system. Again, fantastic. And then this last sentence, it might be my favorite other than that this is wrong. Basing federal policy on truth is critical to scientific inquiry, public safety, morale, and trust in government itself. The only way that thing could be any better is if they had just invoked the God of Jesus Christ. If they had said, God made people this way and this dishonors him. Go ahead.
Oh, I've got so many things I want to say about this. This is how you move the Overton window.
Yeah.
So if let's say a pastor were to make a statement like that in 2018, 2019, or 2022, something like that, in a lot of churches that would be conservative churches, they would have an issue with it.
We had one. The biggest church here in town, remember?
Yes. Yes, that's
Where
right.
A guy came in.
You're right. I'm glad you reminded me of this. So the largest church here in Cincinnati, they brought in a guest speaker who came in and gave a very, very direct, bold, but reasonable, not fire-breathing, reasonable articulation about the sin of transgenderism and the problems of it. The problem is like the church itself had not been on record about that. And so there were protests from LGBTQ people.
What the heck? We thought you guys were the good ones.
They thought that, some people that were church, they interviewed church members and even people who volunteered in the church that did not know that the church was not gay affirming.
Right.
They thought the church was gay affirming. But this is from a president who I don't think is a regenerate believer.
No, I don't either.
But he's got there's more moral clarity in this statement than would have come from many pulpits. And that just shows, this is why I love Trump. And it's not because I think he is a godly man. It's because he's a man that has courage to say what needs to be said. Sometimes it's crass or whatever. So, but I wouldn't deny that. But this needs to be said. And by this being an executive order that is signed by the President of the United States that moves the Overton window such that now pulpits can say this sort of thing with more cover. And I'm glad for that, but it's also disappointing.
Yeah.
It should be the pulpits in the United States giving the president cover, saying like, I will say the thing that is politically difficult for a president to say. And because pastors are saying it, they know, hey, if I say this, the Christian church in America has got my back on this issue. And so I want to say it and I will push for it knowing I've got support.
Yeah.
It is very disappointing to me that the president has to be the one who's not a Christian, regenerate in that sense.
Yeah.
The president is the one moving the Overton window for the church and the moral clarity to say this is wrong. And I'm reminded of a question that Matt Chandler was asked in an interview years ago when somebody pressed him on homosexuality. And he said something to the effect of, well, it's less than God's best.
Right.
This is not God's ideal. And I'm like, no, that is a moment where you have a crystal clear opportunity to say this is wrong. And I love the moral clarity of it. Yeah. I wish there were more moral clarity out of our pulpits and from the church and not this kind of hedging and squishy ambiguity.
No, that's why we all love John MacArthur, because that's
right.
how he would. If somebody asked John MacArthur on Larry King back in the day about homosexuality, they probably did. Somebody could probably look it up.
100%.
That's how he would have answered it. No, it's wrong.
Yeah.
And he would have explained. So, and I'll get in front of this, but some of you may be thinking, well, look, President Trump didn't even write these. Okay, fine. He probably didn't. But you know what? He still had to sign it. I guarantee you the guy is not out to lunch.
I'm sure you read it.
Right, exactly. He's not. He's 78 biologically, but he seems to be about 54 mentally.
He's very sharp.
I mean, he's clearly sharp. Still, so I guarantee you he read this, and regardless, he signed it and has to stand by it. And he's given no indication that he does not believe this. He's given the indication that he is out on the trans stuff, and he should be. So this is a huge thing. It's wonderful. It is good for the country. There you go.
One other thing, I think, another thing this is good. I think this is also an indicator of how the LGBTQ activists have pushed the overturn to the left.
Yeah.
Because what this does is it's basically a line in the sand with transgenderism, but homosexuality, you can have like two homosexual men will still say we're both men.
Right.
And so it kind of lumps homosexuality in with the normal crowd. And it says the line in the sand is way over there. Whereas before Obergefell, homosexuality itself was a line that needed to have been clearer and was blown away by the Supreme Court.
100%. So I want to get President Trump or the next president after him from his party, from the party that I'll vote for, unless something changes in the next 4 years that is unforeseeable. I want to get the next one to be opposed to homosexuality with the same vigor. And then I'll tell you what, after that, so I noticed President Trump's chief of staff is a woman. I want to get to the point where feminism is also. So President Trump, I think, is solid on trans stuff, which he should be. Men can't pretend to be women. Women can't pretend to be men, and I'm not going to protect them. Attaboy, praise God, thank you for it. Then I want to get to the gay stuff. We're not going to support publicly. We're not going to act like two men can be a marriage. And then I want to get to, okay, it is not good or normal or something we should celebrate for women to have high positions of leadership in vocational politics.
All of these things are downstream of feminism.
Yes.
So feminism is like at the source. It is the original. Well, prior to that is even Gnosticism and other ideas, but feminism is kind of where it kind of hit mainstream. And the assertion was that men and women are more interchangeable.
Yeah.
Biological sex doesn't really matter as much. And then from that, you get homosexuality, which leads to transgenderism. So what you're describing is what I would say it's like putting the genie back in the bottle. It is a Herculean task. It would take the equivalent of a cultural and social miracle, but we believe in a God of miracles.
Right.
And I mean, it's certainly possible. Who knows what it would cost, but I am 100% in favor of it. And I think you're absolutely right. It is good for men to be taking the lead in our culture.
Yeah. I mean, so you could kind of view this as, okay, we were fighting a war on multiple fronts, 3 fronts, let's say. I got to fight men pretending to be women and women pretending to be men on one front. I got to fight homosexuality on another front, and I got to fight feminism. Well, one of the fronts we seem to have won one front within this war, and now we can attack the other two.
Yeah.
And I want all people who are homosexual to repent, believe in the Lord Jesus Christ, be saved, and find God's blessing in an actual marriage or an actual romantic relationship that He blesses. So when I say war, I'm not saying like I want all of the homosexual, population in the United States to die. I want them to repent of their sin and trust in Christ Jesus. Same thing for feminism. I want feminism gone. You do too. Yeah. All of us who love the Lord want it gone.
Are you familiar with how this executive order will be implemented?
I'm not entirely, but here's my best understanding / guess. So obviously the president has significant authority over the federal level, the federal government. So my guess is that this would be implemented or could be carried out in things that are underneath his authority, like federal prisons, potentially the military. He's the commander in chief of the armed forces.
Well, Pete Hegseth, I'm sure he would be in favor of this in the military.
But it would not directly impact things at the state or municipal level. The president doesn't have direct authority over what the state of Ohio does or your local government or your county government does. But the private sector, obviously. But here's what it can do. Just like you said, it moves the Overton window for pastors. It can move the Overton window in the culture at large. And I've heard this said about Actually, the BBC, I heard say this in they were lamenting it, but they said, hey, his rolling back of DEI, which I'll get to in a minute, at the federal level will probably have a trickle-down effect such that private companies might get rid of their DEI initiatives.
Come on, man. You're singing my song.
And of course, they were lamenting it. But the point is, a lot of times what the federal government does has a way of then impacting what human resources managers. And so I could see if you're some middle of the road town, and let's say your county government or whatever has said, okay, we no longer have unisex bathrooms or something because that seems to be the way the wind is blowing. Well, you get this executive order implemented at the federal level for a year or two, and all of a sudden that middle of the road purple state town is like, maybe we should go back to having men's rooms and women's rooms.
It's harder to accuse that guy of bigotry.
Right.
Whenever it's become policy at the federal
level.
And everybody always says, politics is downstream of culture. Not always. Politics drives culture too.
Yeah. I would say it can work as though both politics and culture are forms of, I can't remember who's the one who said this, but religion externalized.
Yeah.
So basically President Trump is finding himself signing executive orders that say these things, both because he finds them plausible and somewhat defensible, and the people in his Oval Office and the people in his executive wing of the White House presidential wing or whatever they call it, find it defensible and plausible.
West Wing.
Yeah, the West Wing. And if they find it defensible and plausible, then it's possible, very likely, I would say, that a year or two or three from now, people who are further downstream of the executive wing of the federal branch of government will find them defensible and plausible. And before you know it, it's, hey, all of a sudden, there's conservative-ish companies. So not every company is Target and sold out leftists. There are a lot of companies like Sam's Club or something that might be a little more middle of the road or more towards the conservative end. You let this be the case, be the law of the land at the federal level for a couple of years, and they may adjust what they did after the trans stuff seemed like it won the day. They may adjust what they did. And that's my hope, and I think it's incredibly likely. So directly, it will affect the federal government, I think, but indirectly, it will probably affect governments closer to your home and the private sector as well. Okay, so another reason we should celebrate, or that it's good. President Trump opposes the woke madness. So this is what I was just saying. From the Associated Press here, President Trump's administration has moved to end affirmative action in federal contracting. So that would be the federal government, hiring workers to do something. So now we're talking about both what the federal government does and private companies that it pays, and directed that all federal diversity, equity, and inclusion staff be put on paid leave and eventually be laid off. The moves Tuesday follow an executive order that Trump signed on his first day, ordering a sweeping dismantling of everything from anti-bias training to...
You skipped on. A sweeping dismantling of the federal government.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, thank you. Of the federal government's diversity and inclusion programs that could touch on everything from anti-bias training to funding for minority farmers and homeowners. Now, of course, that's the AP sort of putting in its lamenting, this is so sad that minority farmers are now going to be...
And minority doesn't mean minority in the way that it is often implied.
No, not to mention...
it could be a sexual minority.
Right.
Which means that some transgender person that has, the social skills of an apricot,
right,
has to be put to the front of the line,
right,
because they're trans.
Not to mention it, just the phrasing there of it that could touch on. Okay, well, that makes it sound like this will just somehow impact this good and positive thing, when in reality, what it's saying, what I would phrase it as, and I think this is demonstrably true, it is removing the injustice of saying, because of the color of your skin, I will pick you.
Yeah.
I thought we were all against that like 70 years ago. Like
most of the black people I know are against that. Nobody wants to be the DEI
condescending. It's incredibly condescending. Here's from CBS News on this executive order that he signed there. A memo issued by the U.S. Office of Personnel Management on Tuesday, so that's yesterday, we're recording on Wednesday, instructed agencies to notify DEI staffers, quote, this is the memo from President Trump's Office of Personnel Management, quote, no later than 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Wednesday, that they were being placed on administrative leave effective immediately, quote, as the agency takes steps to close/end all DEIA initiatives, offices, and programs. Tuesday's order also directs, CBS News says, the Attorney General to create a plan to deter the private sector. So not just at the federal level, but the Attorney General is directed now to deter the private sector from adopting or continuing DEI programs. Quote, as a part of this plan, each agency shall identify up to 9 potential civil compliance investigations of publicly traded corporations, large nonprofit corporations or associations, foundations with assets of $500 or more, state and local bar and medical associations, and institutions of higher education with endowments over $1 billion, Tuesday's order read. So translation, we ain't going to do DEI anymore at the federal government, but I also want wherever we've got authority or influence in the private sector, I want you sniffing out DEI and getting rid of it.
Oh, man. I've seen some of my friends just kind of joking on Twitter, half joking, but they're just like, it's so much winning.
Yeah.
I can't take all the winning. And I'm like, it is, I don't mean that in this sort of a, it's not morally neutral winning, like, my football team beating another football team. It's like, this is a victory for goodness, rightness, even it is not explicitly Christian in name, but it is Christian in its
it adheres to justice. There's a reason why Lady Justice is blindfolded outside of every courthouse she's outside of. She is. It's literally, God says, do not. Your eye shall not pity. When somebody actually commits a crime, and you're not allowed. You're not permitted to give unequal weight to somebody just because they're of a particular ethnicity, which is what we do. We right now. If you have a certain color skin, you are likelier to get a contract, likelier to get promoted. And I mean, even Bill Maher and guys like that, I think, recognize the craziness of this now. I listen every once in a while. I listen to Bill Maher's monologue. I wouldn't recommend it because he drops a million F-bombs. But I think he's old enough and, dare I say, smart enough to recognize that with things like the LA fire I was listening to him talk about, he's like, you hired, he didn't say exactly this, but I think I'm representing him more or less, right? You're hiring a lesbian black woman to run this fire department or whatever, or to make this video about being a fireman. No, I don't care if she's a lesbian. I care, can she put out the fire?
Right. Have you heard some of the interviews around that issue? It's like there were people that were interviewed prior to, I believe these were like videos that were surfaced after the fire.
Yeah, I think I did.
I can't remember who it was, but I'm just bringing it to mind as you're talking about this. The person talking about, it's like, if somebody is in danger or whatever, it's like whenever somebody comes to rescue them, that you want them to feel as though they can relate to that person. Like, if your house is on fire, you don't care what color they are. You don't care. What you care about is competence. And we've talked about this on other podcast episodes before. It's like DEI produces incompetence because you're valuing something other than their competence for the position they hold. Right.
So in other words, you kind of incentivize either saying I'm gay instead of being good at whatever it is you hire for.
Yeah.
And that not only is that obviously irrational, it is unloving to your actual God-given neighbor. It is unloving to hire a woman to be a firefighter. I'd argue it's unloving to hire women to be firefighters, period. That's not how God made women. They're not meant to be running into burning buildings and putting out fires and carrying out men.
Like that woman said in the video.
Right.
This gay black woman. Do you remember what she said?
Yeah.
She was
You're
like,
in the wrong place or something.
Yeah, she said, well, if somebody says, well, you're not strong enough to carry out a man, well, it's his fault for being in that burning building in the first place.
Yeah.
The most absurd thing you could say.
That's certainly unloving, but I would also say it's unloving to your neighbor to just prioritize that which is not what you're actually hiring for. Your neighbor is going to be potentially in a burning house.
Yeah.
You should prioritize getting him out of that burning house safely.
So we're sitting here recording his podcast using mics and computers and all this stuff. I don't care who made the microphone.
Right.
I don't care who made the computer. I don't care how they felt. I don't care if they were gay or white or trans or whatever. I just want this to work.
Right.
Because that's what we're here for.
Yes.
We're here using equipment that we expect to work, but to inject identity into everything is poisonous and destructive.
And I think people with a good working common sense detector, even though they're not regenerate, which I would put Elon Musk in this category.
Yeah.
I think over the last few years recognize this. It seems like Mark Zuckerberg is probably in the same. Joe Rogan. There are people who are intellectually curious enough and committed enough to figuring out what actually exists.
Well, what radicalized Elon Musk was his child. You remember that?
Yeah, I do. The trans stuff where he has a son, right? That was claiming to be, am I remembering right? Son who wants to be a girl.
I think it's something like that. And it was promoted, and I believe by the mother. At least supported by the mother, and he was not able to turn it around. And he was like, "Wait a minute!" And that radicalized him, and I'm glad for it because that has had a good effect in our country.
And all of this, by the way, I would consider. I'm not the one who came up with this. This might have been Josh Dawes' word, but all of this I would consider, and I think, that might be where I heard it. But I would consider it pre-evangelism. Mm-hmm. I think it is basically softening the soil for someone to receive Christ Jesus. And you see this obviously, I know there are people in the scriptures like the Apostle Paul who are militantly opposed to Christ and then converted out of that. But there's a reason why you see God-fearers like Cornelius in the book of Acts and in the Gospels even, who are curious about Christ, curious about the God of the Bible, curious about the Hebrew scriptures, and who then become converted. I think you can just imagine this in your own life. If there's a guy at your workplace who seems to be, man, they lied about the COVID vaccine, it seems like, and they lied about, why do I feel bad for having white skin? And man, it seems like a lot of the people who hate the Bible or hate the way the Bible talks believed the things that I now know are lies.
Yeah. Maybe
I should give the Bible a second chance. Like that, you can clearly see this happening.
Yeah. No, think of an extreme example. If you have somebody who, their life is completely a disaster, and they've just let's say have somebody who's just a serial adulterer, and they've just screwed up their lives. It's like for that person, when they've heaped up so much sin over the years, their conscience is so wounded over the years by a culture that's promoted those things. That person has a lot of just cognitive things to overcome to be able to consider the gospel. And as you say, it's like God-fearers. There is such a thing as receptive soil and hard soil in evangelism. And hard soil is soil that is a people or a society generally that has so hardened itself against the truths of God's word. The rebellion has moved to such a point to where they're being given over to their sin, that it's not all evangelism is not equal.
Yeah.
I mean, all evangelism in the sense that conversion is always a work of God miraculously in the heart of a believer, but God works through means. And it's let's say you have a guy who is generally a hardworking guy, generally moral guy, loves his wife, loves his children, but doesn't know Jesus. You introduce the gospel to him. It's not as though everything about his life has to be upended and rearranged in order to follow Christ. It's like there is a path. That's not to minimize the sheer miraculous nature of every conversion. The Holy Spirit does it. But it does say that there are means that God uses, and already living in line with the gospel it does make, whenever you preach the gospel to them, that person could have a receptivity that other people that are more hardened wouldn't have.
And if we actually believe open flagrant sin, like open celebration of homosexuality, open celebration of partiality, like the kind that DEI supports, open celebration of abortion, open celebration of all manner of violent or unjust sin, if we actually believe that's bad and hurts people, then you should want your society to be more in line with the God of the Bible.
That's right.
Even if the majority of people are not yet regenerate themselves. Of course, I want to reach a point, my eschatology, I think, points me to this direction, where the majority of human beings on planet Earth are converted. But between now and then, I do want a society that is more Christian, not less Christian, that is more in line with the actual justice of the actual God than less. And I mean, I'm reading to the kids now. I read this book in 2023, but I'm reading to my kids now during family worship. John Patton's autobiography. Went to the pagan cannibal islands that are now called Vanuatu, but back then it was the New Hebrides. They eat each other. They murder their wife. They strangle. If a guy dies, they strangle his wife and then kill her and eat her. Basically, I mean, it's awful stuff. And he will talk. Obviously, he wants them converted. That's the main reason he's there. But he will talk about the civilizing power of Christianity. And in between the point where he gets there and nobody's saved, but they're doing that, and the point where people are saved, he wants them to stop strangling their wives and eating each other. And that's a good thing.
Yes.
So he brings the civilizing power of the actual Word of God.
How absurd would it be to say in that? It's like, well, law doesn't change the heart.
Yeah.
That.
I mean, it's a great. I commend it to anybody.
What is it? So it's a book?
Yeah, it's the autobiography of John Patton. It's probably public. I'm sure it's public domain, so you could probably read it for free online. But the autobiography of John Patton, or Patton is his last name. Phenomenal. So there you go. So DEI, partiality is falling. Another reason to celebrate. President Trump is aware of and appears to oppose the deep state. And I'll define the deep state as the administrative bureaucracy populated by unelected and often unknown officials who thoroughly regulate and otherwise impact American life without virtually any accountability. I'll read that one more time. The definition of the thing that I'm saying President Trump seems to oppose.
The deep state.
The deep state is the administrative bureaucracy populated by unelected and often unknown officials who thoroughly regulate and otherwise impact American life without virtually any accountability.
Yeah.
So you've got things like a classic example would be the EPA, where it is populated with people who were not elected by anybody. Its head, I'm sure, and probably the deputy, I would imagine, somebody can double check me, have to get confirmed by Congress. But the Joe Schmoes in the EPA who are creating regulations that impact everybody from farmers to Exxon are not elected. And similar to the FBI, I'm sure you have lots of them who just are there for 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years, creating regulations that are cumbersome on regular people, citizens, and none of them are elected. And that is clearly not what the framers of our Constitution and the American spirit desires, desired or desires. But it's also just, it's unjust. It is unjust to have people behind curtains whose names you don't know and who you cannot fire regulating your life.
And the presumption, what we're told, is that they're doing this for our good, and that there's no corruption going on. The regulation is needed and good for public health or safety or that sort of thing.
Because human nature, they're all just altruists.
Yeah, of course. And here's another downstream effect of Trump's first election, is that the Supreme Court justices that were elected were of a certain makeup that overturned the Chevron deference.
Yeah.
I don't remember the court case, but the Chevron deference, you may have heard of this, it was this policy that enabled this bureaucracy, this deep state to form and grow unchecked, because it basically put those regulations beyond the reach of any kind of congressional oversight or judicial review. It's like they were able to arbitrarily impose whatever they wanted. And then the Supreme Court, with justices who were appointed by Donald Trump, they overturned that precedent. And that's the kind of level of detail that I'm not as familiar with. But the people that I listen to and respect, they said this is one of the hugest things that's happened in the last 2 decades, because it really gives the executive branch now the power to deregulate things that are hyper-regulated currently, whereas before they had no authority to do so. So I think this is probably a downstream effect, very much tied to that Chevron deference, that court case that overturned that.
Yeah. Government currently does much more than it should. Elon Musk knows it, and so should you. This is from CBS News on the Department of Government Efficiency. I know. It's it's
this kind of, the Doge is it's a joke, but it's a joke that is pretty several layers deep. I had to look it up a few weeks ago, but the internet meme, just the word Doge, basically to say Doge, it means it's a joke. And there's a whole story behind it, but it is a joke. And it's just, that's classic. That's definitely Elon Musk's sense of humor. And basically saying like, here's our government agency that is dismantling things that are a joke.
I mean, it is worth noting that Elon Musk does share some traits with some of the original founders. I mean, so Ben Franklin would write letters as with under a pen names which frequently would be jokes. And of course, Ben Franklin himself was an inventor, like Elon Musk, probably almost certainly not a born again Christian, but he invented things. The potbelly stove comes to mind. I think bifocals.
Genius.
A polymath. He was a Renaissance man with a sense of humor and also deeply invested in and proud of the American spirit of liberty and exploration and an informed optimism and all of those things seem to. Elon Musk has struck me as very similar in that way.
That's interesting.
And the Doge thing, I think, would fit right in with that. I mean, I could see some of our more mischievous founding fathers doing something similar if they were in our damn place. But this is from CBS News. Musk, the world's richest person with a net worth of $319 billion, according to the Bloomberg Billionaires Index, has described the U.S. government as bloated and said its spending is unsustainable. Quick pause just to say, I find it hard to believe that at least 60% of the voting populace would not agree with that. I'll bet you 6 out of 10 regular American voters,
I think it's a conservative estimate,
would agree with that. Even, I'm sure, typical, just regular Democrats, maybe not sold out leftists, but regular Democrat, like somebody, we've got guys in our family who probably voted for Harris or voted for Biden, who would probably agree with the sentiment. The federal government spends too much money and is bloated.
And Kamala Harris would have done absolutely zero to rein it in.
No,
and she would have accelerated
it. Absolutely, she would have. The Tesla founder also said he wants to reduce the number of federal agencies to 99, down from more than 400. I love that amen for the stars, which he also does literally. There are so many agencies, he said, that people have never heard of and that have overlapping areas of responsibility. He said this earlier this month while on the campaign trail with Trump. So this is an article from a couple months ago. So this is probably, Q4 last year. Musk also said he could cut at least $2 trillion from the annual budget.
Wow.
Your money's being wasted and the Department of Government Efficiency will fix that, Musk said.
Let's go.
And the reality is you cut from the budget and you do what President Trump's tax cuts, I believe, did in the 2016 presidency, which is cause the economy to get hot. You're going to increase revenues even though you cut taxes, just because there's that much more economic prosperity.
That's right.
And so if you cut the budget, increase the revenue.
Well, you want money being spent on production, things being made, things being bought and sold, goods and services changing hands. Right now, we're spending an increasing percentage of our federal budget on management, bureaucracy, red tape, managing people and things that aren't really producing things.
And anybody knows in the private sector, I mean, all of us have jobs. We all work at company. You all know that 1 or 2 or 3 people at your company that don't do anything. If you're at a big enough company, 200 plus people, I guarantee you know of a couple of people who's like, what do they even get paid for?
It's like Milton with his stapler.
Right. And it's terrible for morale. It's terrible for the company. It's money that's wasted. It's terrible for the individual. Yeah. Even if they don't know it, it is terrible for them. It is a bad thing for your soul to receive money for as though you were doing something productive when you're not.
Yeah, so we have our church staff. We're small staff, 3 full-time, 1 part-time staff. Imagine if we had to, hire a full-time person and their job was all about compliance.
Yeah,
just making sure all the rules are being followed top to bottom. And let's say I had another one and had another one. Let's say half of our staff. I mean, that would eat up our capacity as a church. That would be half of our budget because it'd be half of our staff, and they don't do anything.
Yeah,
they nitpick and kind of nanny everything. That is how our bureaucratic system, deep state. That's how it works.
Yeah, I heard Tucker Carlson interviewing. I think his name was Sean Davis, but it was the most recent episode of his show that he does. He was interviewing the guy about the Trump assassination in Butler, and the guy pointed out, I have no reason to doubt this, the guy sounded intelligent enough and well-researched enough that I'm confident that this is true. But he said the lead counter sniper in Butler, when he testified as to why he did not ever go up on or go into the building where, what was his name? The shooter? Crooks. I can't remember. Crooks. Thomas Crooks, right. When the lead counter sniper said why he never went up on that building or into that building, even though it was pretty close by and it's an obvious place that a potential shooter would be, he said because he had to do his paperwork, and you live and die by paperwork.
Yeah.
That is exactly what we're talking about. You add these layers.
The president's life was in danger because a man had paperwork.
Right. And that the culture was such that he felt justified, or he felt it was normal to not explore the area where the potential president could be murdered from because he had to do that paperwork.
Yeah.
You want a culture where if somebody were to be, I got to do this paperwork, everybody would be like, what?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? There's a building over there. We don't... Forget the paperwork. Yeah. That's the culture you want.
And you need paperwork because everything has to be documented because everything is regulated. And anything that's not regulated is a potential lawsuit because everything is over litigated. These are layers upon layers upon layers of bureaucracy where everything has to be protected because somebody's always coming out to get you. That is just a sign of cultural decline.
Absolutely. And it's not for nothing that we don't have a space shuttle as the federal government anymore. We were hitching rides, I think, on Russia's. And Elon Musk has rockets going up, and they're getting caught by these giant chopsticks when they come back down.
That's
and
amazing.
I know people point out, well, the last one, there was one that exploded recently, whatever. Fine. But I'm just saying the fact that
that's never happened in history before.
Well, and he got there so quickly. Their company got there so quickly because, I'm speaking obviously as an outsider, but I'm confident in what I'm asserting, that company, which is not encumbered by a century's worth of useless bureaucratic red tape, is able to, we have a goal to get things and people up there into space and do cool things once we're there. That's what we do all day.
Yeah.
When we come into work and we work hard for 10, 12 hours a day, it's to get people in space and do cool stuff. But if I'm in a federal government, an agency of the federal government called the National Aeronautics and Space Agency, all of a sudden it's like, well, first I've got to, we start work at 8 and then I got to spend the first hour on my paper.
I can imagine somebody like, at Tesla headquarters, if it were a bureaucratic kind of environment, being like, well, the chopsticks catching the rocket thing was cool, but, I need your TPS report. So
Right.
did you have a cover sheet on your TPS report? And what he did with Twitter was remarkable because he came in and people was like, oh, he's going to ruin this thing. And all the advertisers were abandoning him. And he came in there. He said, this place was like a luxury cruise.
Yeah.
Nobody was working. Everybody was just going to the spa at Twitter headquarters, all that sort of thing. So he cuts the staff. I don't know, 70%, 60%, whatever there was. It was some significant percentage, and it got better. The product got better because the only people working there now are people that really care about it. And they become more streamlined, efficient, less bureaucratic, and it's a much better product. And the sky's the limit with X now.
Yeah. So that's a great thing to look forward to in the Trump second term. Next one, President Trump will work. And this is a huge one. This is probably why he won the election. President Trump will work to end our illegal immigration crisis. And it is a crisis. Pastor Michael and I did a whole episode on this. You do not love your country and you do not love your actual neighbor if you don't care about illegal immigration.
Yeah.
Just like you wouldn't be loving the people in your house if you just let anybody walk into your house. You have security teams at your church. We have a decent sized church. We have a security team. If you come in here looking suspicious or you don't belong here and you have you do this with things you care about. I pointed out the other day on that This is Papal Bull Twitter account that Pope Francis, the Bishop of Rome over there, running the head of state for the Vatican City, called what President Trump was doing rightly. President Trump is doing it justly, legally, and rightly. Pope Frankie called it a disgrace.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you go look at the Vatican City. They got a dress code. If you wear spaghetti straps or have an offensive tattoo and you try to get into the Vatican City, they will turn you around and walk you right back out.
They've got walls.
It's absurd the way that people, because the United States, I guess, is so big and so prosperous, geographically it is big and it is still by God's grace prosperous. It's like, well, you can basically, I think subconsciously, it's like you can take it. you can take it. That's not the point. I have an actual neighbor. I have 2 actual neighbors. You probably do too, listener. On my street. And then you've got neighbors around you and neighbors that you work with, people who are in your community, to legally in your community by rule of law, to not care about the fact that other people are crossing the border illegally and then taking revenue that the first people, your actual neighbors, taxes pay, and then taking services, taking up spots in emergency rooms, that you do not love your actual neighbors if that doesn't trouble you, bother you, if you don't want that fixed. So President Trump will. From his speech, quote, all illegal entry will immediately be halted, and we will begin the process of returning millions and millions of criminal aliens back to places they came. I will end the practice of catch and release. I will send troops to the southern border to repel the disastrous invasion of our country. Under the orders I signed today, we will also be designating the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, which, if they're not terrorist, I don't know what terrorist means. The beheading people and, incredibly
horrible things.
Yeah. From the Associated Press, the Justice Department is directing its federal prosecutors to investigate any state or local officials who stand in the way of beefed up enforcement of immigration laws under the Trump administration, according to a memo to the entire workforce obtained by the Associated Press on Wednesday. I love that. Great. I know the guy who wrote that at the AP is probably weeping as he types it, but I love it. The Justice Department is telling federal prosecutors that there's a state or local official who's standing in the way. If somebody's saying this is a sanctuary city or a sanctuary village or a sanctuary county, you get in there and you tell them no. I listened to the guy. I think he was good. I think he was going to be Trump's head of ICE and now has a different role. But either way, I listened to him talking about, I think it was the mayor of Denver, saying that this is a sanctuary city and we're not going to enforce the immigration laws. And him saying, like, look, if you don't care about your citizens, fine, but get out of the way and we'll care about the people of your city. And if you get in my way, we'll throw you in jail because that's a federal crime to interfere.
He's being tough. I love it.
Yeah. The memo was written by acting Deputy Attorney General Emil Bove, and it also instructs the Justice Department's Civil Division to help identify state and local laws and policies that threaten to impede the Trump administration's immigration initiatives and potentially challenge them in court. Prosecutors shall, quote, take all steps necessary to protect the public and secure the American border by removing illegal aliens from the country and prosecuting illegal aliens for crimes committed in U.S. jurisdiction, the memo says. It directs prosecutors to investigate for potential criminal charges, cases in which state and local officials obstruct or impede federal functions. You try to stop me from enforcing immigration law and getting illegal aliens out of here, I'm coming after you.
Yeah.
That is good. That is proper and that is appropriate. And listen to me, not one picture of a crying child should change your opinion on what I just said.
That's what
you can sympathize with a crying child. Who wouldn't? But that does not, your I shall not pity means something.
You're quoting the Bible.
Yes, correct. And it means that when a law is broken or a sin is committed, your human sympathy for the person cannot dictate what is an appropriate discipline or reaction. And we know this with our children. Yeah. And you would know this with an intruder in your home. If an intruder came into your home and then started weeping about how he's on crystal meth and he really wants to get off crystal meth, you might have sympathy as you call the police or as you take your handgun and point it at him and tell him to walk out.
I think it's an important point of discernment, which is this is a trick of the news media of the left. They use empathy and emotion, compassion, misguided compassion as a way to undermine needed tough principles or actions taken by the government. And so we will see, I guarantee you, heartbreaking pictures. There will be heartbreaking stories. There will be things about, this or that family being broken up and that sort of thing. And all of those things very well may be sad. And certainly it is good and right to, for your heart to go out to them. But that cannot determine policy.
Exactly.
Because you do not determine policy by what feels good or bad or by how it affects an individual. This is this is mission critical. This is like an existential issue for the viability of our society. And we have people who are not here legally. We have laws for how to get in legally.
Yeah.
Trump has to enforce them, and he is enforcing what is necessary and legal for our country. And we cannot allow ourselves to be emotionally manipulated by stories and news media and things like that.
And this is where leadership requires that. There are probably, I wasn't in the Navy, obviously, myself. I'm sure you can tell that I wasn't in the Navy just from how I talk. But I picture a lot of times the captain of a naval ship in when I'm thinking about leadership, because I'm just aware from reading and movies and whatnot, the culture of being the captain of a ship in the Navy involves basically a gracious, loving posture towards those who are under your care as a whole, such that you may have to discipline or make hard decisions that affect one of them, and that's just part of what it is to be a leader. And therefore, I think that is part of that is why having women in leadership positions in government and will lead to ineffective policies.
Well, women are going to be more compassionate.
Yes.
And that's just that God had made them that way, and you want them that way because that makes them good mothers. That does not make them good civil magistrates, leaders, and in any kind of authoritative position over men, because men need discipline, and a society needs discipline. And as you were talking, I was reminded of a scene in Master and Commander, very powerful scene where there was this one. There was a guy that was an officer but young and was not well regarded, and then somebody was passing him on the deck and did not salute, but rather kind of bumped into him. And Russell Crowe's character, who was the captain of the ship, he had that man flogged.
Yeah,
and there was a dispute, and people were like, "Why are you doing this?" Why he's like, "Men must be governed." That's how he was just this forceful scene, and he was right. But it powerfully captures the difficulty and anguish of imposing discipline even when you don't want to. And I think that I'm sure that I don't think Trump is heartless, and I'm sure that there are he may be aware of difficult stories, but that must not deter him from doing what is right, because we cannot allow ourselves to be emotionally manipulated.
Right. To allow individual sympathetic cases to determine your policy for the whole of what you're responsible, the whole of your stewardship, is unloving. You may think it's loving because I am doing something which makes me feel better about this one individual, but now I have put the entire flock of whatever it is that I'm responsible for at risk or at jeopardy because of my allowing myself to be emotionally steered by this one individual case.
Yeah.
And that is why, I mean, being a judge is an incredibly difficult, but it requires sober-mindedness in that way. I'm putting on robes. I'm now taking on the office of being an impartial judge, and I can take your heartfelt confession into account, but I cannot allow that to dictate your punishment.
Yeah.
When a judge sentences somebody, he has to take into account, what does this crime merit? And similarly, when you're the president or the governor or the head of ICE, you came into this country illegally.
Yeah.
There are other people here who are here legally who were negatively affected by millions of you doing this. I cannot let your tears dictate my stewardship of those people I'm responsible for.
That's fatherly. That's
That
strong.
is. That's exactly what it is. Okay. President Trump, just a couple more. President Trump appears to know that he got played a little bit on COVID. And I think this is true. He used to, it seemed to me, he touted quite a bit the vaccine, which most of us are at best skeptical of its efficacy. And many of us are pretty frustrated at what it appears to have done. I mean, the myocarditis thing is not just a conspiracy theory, that people have myocarditis because of the vaccine. Okay. And obviously the initial shutdown and things like that, I think most of us could all agree, was vastly overdone. Here's from his executive order on withdrawing from the World Health Organization. Quote, the United States noticed its withdrawal from the WHO in 2020 due to the organization's mishandling of the COVID-19 pandemic that arose out of Wuhan, China, and other global health crises, its failure to adopt urgently needed reforms, and its inability to demonstrate independence from the inappropriate political influence of the WHO member states. He's withdrawing from the WHO. He appointed Robert Kennedy as health secretary. I think these are signals that they're either signals that he knows we think, or some of us think he got played on COVID, or they're signals that he knows he did and he's correct. He's course correcting.
Yeah.
He's an intelligent man. My guess is he's aware that COVID was not as bad as all of us, I think, initially thought, and that there was reason for people acting like it was worse than it was. Another reason, President Trump has not succumbed to the secular environmentalist climate hysteria. This is from World News Group. Trump's orders aim to expedite energy production by removing restrictions on drilling for liquefied natural gas in Alaska and declaring a national energy emergency. At the same time, Trump canceled leasing permits for wind turbine developments on the outer continental shelf and ended the electric vehicle mandate. And I'll bring this up when I get to the last one here in just a second, that he knows he's our president, not the world's, but he also is withdrawing us from the Paris Agreement. Basically, I'll go ahead and put my
Paris,
cards.
that's the climate accords. Right?
It is. I'll go ahead and put my cards on the table. I do not think that fossil fuels are causing the earth to warm. Even if somebody were to convince me of that, which is probably not going to happen, you have not convinced me that it is an existential threat, or as big an existential threat as us buying all our oil from other countries and just letting the oil reserves we have sit there untouched.
Yeah.
So I am grateful that.
I've heard somebody say this, and you may correct me on this, but I've heard somebody say recently, it's like America has under our own feet, under our own soil, all the oil that we'd ever need.
Yeah, so I think that is, I'm not a geoscientist, obviously, but I do think that is more or less true.
So why are we buying it from Saudi Arabia and Iraq and these places?
So we have natural resources; those are from God. I'll go ahead and give you this as food for thought if you've never considered it. There's Is Genesis History? I know you've seen that documentary. Yeah. One of the creation scientists in that film, he says that he believes global warming, or he at least indicates it could be, global warming could be the earth healing from Noah's flood. That you have an ice age right after Noah's flood, and he explains why. And he's like, the earth gradually over centuries basically could be warming over centuries, not even just this past century, but over many centuries is increasingly warming, because it's returning to stasis from prior to the flood, when the earth was warmer than, what it was for most of the last 2,000 or 4,000 years. So, okay, last one. President Trump understands the responsibility of his office. He is the American president, not the world's. And here's that bit about the Paris Agreement. This is President Trump removed the United States from the Paris Agreement. And here is I got this from the United Nations Committee on Climate Change website. Okay, so this is what they say about the Paris Agreement, the climate accords. Quote, implementation of the Paris Agreement requires economic and social transformation based on the best available science. I love that. You sign up for this, you got to transform your population. You got to change how they think. Make sure they buy all this according to the best possible science.
And we've seen what the science can justify.
Exactly. 2020 told us a lot about. Let me tell you right now, I am out on people personifying the science. Science is a process, not a person. Science doesn't say anything.
Yeah.
The Paris Agreement works on a 5-year cycle of increasingly ambitious climate action, or ratcheting up, carried out by countries. So if you sign up for this, you got to ratchet your way up, increasingly make more wind turbines or whatever. Since 2020, countries have been submitting their national climate action plans, known as nationally determined contributions. Each successive NDC is meant to reflect an increasingly higher degree of ambition compared to the previous version. You got to constantly be burning less coal and using less oil and building more than wind turbines.
This is so naive, because you have, whenever you have something like this, to where there is some, global initiative and commitment to invest in certain kinds of energies and not in other kinds of energies, you've just created incentive that every country is now obligated themselves to buy into, which will then attract people who will want to capitalize that and benefit from it.
Yeah.
And that is an inherently corruptible system, and it is based on pseudoscience, things that are not actual proven from data, but rather they are conjectured based on somebody's political ideology.
And they're clearly virtue signaling.
Yes.
And I mean, the vaccine, the COVID vaccine is a good example of what you just described. So there's no liability. You can't sue the maker of the vaccine. And, oh, by the way, the federal government's going to buy millions of doses or whatever.
Yeah.
So, hey, all right, let's just get this thing out as quickly as we can.
Yeah.
And then just one more quote to demonstrate that he understands he's the American president, not the world's, and that is appropriate, and he should. From World News Group, quote, changes such as immediate U.S. withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement, exit from the World Health Organization, and retreat from refugee commitments as a member of the United Nations highlighted Trump's intent to redirect government resources to domestic needs. We're going to take care of our house. I got people I'm the father of this house, and I know he's not literally the father of the country, but just it's a similar, I'm talking about a principle here. I'm the shepherd of this household. Therefore, I need to make sure the kids in this household are eating. And the American system right now, she's broken. There's lots. Yes. Our front door is hanging off the hinges and just anybody's walking in. Our back door's off the hinges and just anybody's walking in. We got people killing themselves in this household at an alarming rate. Yeah. I need to fix what's going on here because I'm responsible for these people. I was not elected and I am not called to be the president of the world.
Yeah.
So
it would be hubris to think otherwise, but a lot of these people, that's how they operate.
Yes.
They think they're saving the planet.
Right. And do not hear me saying that we should do nothing for the rest of the world. But I am saying
it's ordered priorities.
Right. So if you and I are the fathers and husbands in a particular household, we want to be good neighbors to the people around us. We want to be good citizens to the people of our city or township or county. But our first priority must be our wives and children.
Yes.
That's the responsibility God has given to us as husband and father. Well, the responsibility that God has given to President Trump, to your governor, to local elected officials is that particular locality that they lead. And what we've done, I think, especially through the administrative state over the last 100 years or so, is to basically our elected officials give some attention to what's actually happening inside our borders. But the lion's share of our best stuff, our best attention seems to be elsewhere, at least administratively, if not from the actual president. Okay, we're going to close out here. I just want to unmask one bit of sophistry. I don't know how many more times they can play the Hitler card before literally no one who is not already working at MSNBC cares. Again, with the Hitler thing with Elon Musk. At this point, I'm just going to tell you, listener, just don't care.
Yeah.
If you know you're not Hitler, and if you know Donald Trump isn't Hitler, and if you know no one who works for Donald Trump is Hitler, then just don't care when they say it.
Yeah, let me try a different approach. The cool kids don't care what the left thinks anymore.
Yeah.
So if you want to be with the cool kids, then join those who don't care what the left thinks and who are anti-fragile enough to be stronger and to be built up by the accusations and the hatred of the left.
Yeah. To give you just a couple of Bible-saturated Christian thinking tidbits here, read Romans 13, 1-7. Michael and I have read it before on air. In it, God describes through the Apostle Paul, the inspired Apostle Paul, authoritatively and inerrantly what the role of the diaconate, the civil magistrate is, and it is not what most of the administrative state currently does. The Department of Education is way outside of of the federal government's purview. Government is to put down evildoers, to uphold the good, and to administer justice.
That's right.
And President Trump's executive orders tell me he is much more in line with that calling than Kamala Harris would have ever been. And two quotes here. One from Tertullian. This is from Ad Nationis, Book 1, Chapter 6, To the Nations. Tertullian says about the injustice of capricious Roman laws, an unjust law secures no respect. And this would be DEI initiatives are a great example. In my opinion, however, there is a suspicion among you, the Romans of his day, that some of these laws are unjust, for not a day passes by without your modifying their severity and inquiry by fresh deliberations and decisions. You guys know your own laws are unjust. Tertullian said it in his day, and I think we could say it in ours. And Lactantius, Constantine's tutor, wrote this in the Divine Institutes, Book 6, Chapter 9. Civil law is one thing which varies everywhere according to customs. However, justice is another thing which God has set forth uniformly and simply to all. And I think Lactantius, I can't remember how you say his name, but he would affirm, and so would I, that most of the DEI stuff are abortion laws. These things are clearly unjust and out of bounds of God's eternal moral law. Two logs and specs, and then I'll see if you've got any closing thoughts before I give us some reasons for hope. Log and spec to get out of our own eye first. Number one, conservative Christians. Those of us who celebrated and are celebrating President Trump's victory cannot and must not budge on abortion. So, do not budge on this. Hold his feet to the fire. We love that he's president. We appreciate that he's president. Hold his feet to the fire and his administration's feet to the fire. Second log and spec to get out of our own eye. We should not lose sight of the fact that the presidency is not supposed to be the most important thing in American life. A friend of ours, much more so yours than mine, but Michael Foster, did county before country. And I thought that was a great sentiment, great thing to name a conference. I'm glad we all worked for President Trump in his victory. We now need to do lots and lots of little things in our cities and in our townships and in our counties and in our villages and in our states.
Yeah.
That's where Ron DeSantis is a good example of how at the local level, he's the governor of Florida, and the entire culture of Florida, at least governmentally, has been changed. He's not president, but he's been able to do a lot. And you and I have seen this in our church. You can see this on streets. You can see this in households. We talk about how AIG, Answers in Genesis, has impacted a little bit the culture of Northern Kentucky, or at least the Christian landscape of Northern Kentucky. It's great that President Trump won, but let's not keep our eyes only on the presidency as though Washington, D.C. is the most important thing.
Yeah, well, the way that the liberal Democrats operate is they want the presidency to be the most important thing. Mm-hmm. They want it to be a totalizing kind of office where so much power is concentrated, and they want they want government to be the centerpiece of American life. Yeah, and in so doing, they replace the other alternatives for the centerpiece of American life, which is where it should be, which is home, family, church, that sort of thing. But if government is the centerpiece, then we rely on government for our rights and privileges. We look to government to feed us, to clothe us, to give us jobs, to protect us. Government becomes an encroaching, totalizing force, which ultimately is a God substitute. So a good president will be a president who is consequential in that he makes his own actions less relevant for your daily life. Yeah. So he would do the best to protect. He will use his power to protect and create the conditions by which the presidency is not important. That's so right. One of the greatest outcomes of a Trump presidency would be that 4 years from now, the presidency is less important because we're all doing things. Yeah. And because he's kind of cleared a path and he's gotten the government out of our hair and he's reduced bureaucracy. He's allowed free enterprise to continue. He's upheld justice. He's not given into woke DEI garbage. And we are able to lead normal American lives where we can focus on our families and our communities, everything local. That would be a huge win. And that really is, there's a simple mandate biblically for the president or any government elected official, and that is to uphold the good and punish the bad. There are other things you could say are ancillary to it. You want to be protection from foreign invaders and that sort of thing. There is a good and legitimate use of government, but the best government is a government that is not so intrusive in our lives. And so it's not the most important thing. Yeah. But right now it has to be, because that's the only place that is the position of power from which the encroachment of government can be reduced. And I think Trump's got the courage to do it. He seems like he's got a clear vision of what needs to happen. He's learned from his wilderness wandering. He's got, many commentators, I'm not the first to observe this, but it seems as though those wilderness wanderings have given us a better Trump than we would have gotten if he were elected in 2020.
That's a good point.
And so we have a Trump that is focused, and he's cleared out. We would have had a Vice President Pence. And Pence has shown himself to be a weak man, that even though I think he's a born-again believer, from all I know, I have no reason to doubt that from my knowledge. But Mike Pence was not a strong man, and he was not on board with Trump's vision. He was placed into that position to curry the evangelical vote. Having secured the evangelical vote already, Trump was able to choose J.D. Vance, who is a man who is much more aligned with his vision, even though he's not an evangelical Christian. But I do think Vance will lead and govern alongside Trump in such a way that will create an environment that is favorable to Christians. And I'll take that over an actual born-again Christian in the office who is weak and ineffective. Somebody may disagree with me on that, but I want somebody who governs in ways that are favorable to Christianity. That's better than somebody who's weak and ineffective and passive and will not govern in ways that are better for Christians.
That's a great way to put it. And he, to your point about him being willing to make government, or at least the federal government, less of a character in the drama of the American landscape. I mean, the other day I think it was yesterday, he announced the $500 billion AI push, something along the lines of $500 billion investment into artificial intelligence. And I listened to him, and private. He's talking about a private $500 billion investment, not the federal government. Okay. And of course, Democrats can only think, and I mean, a lot of politicians can only think in terms of the federal government, quote unquote, investing in things that they believe in. But the federal government doesn't really invest. It takes from its citizens and then gives that what it just took elsewhere.
It creates nothing.
Right. So I love, I am assuming that a lot of it comes from his experience as an actual successful businessman. And the same would be for Elon Musk, one of his advisors. But yeah, he does clearly seem to understand that the federal government and the presidency are not supposed to be the center of American life, American civic life. Okay, reasons for hope. Let me give you 3, and then we'll end. First, truth. You can and should take hope in the fact that the truth is true, no matter how much of it President Trump or any other leader believes it or upholds it. And President Trump holds to and upholds quite a bit of good and significant truth. But all of the truth, including the one about unborn babies that we want him to hold to and he does not yet, the truth is true, period, regardless of how many people hold to it. We can and should and must unashamedly proclaim the truths that babies in the womb are people, whom it should be illegal to murder, that manhood and womanhood are distinct realities created by God, no matter what anyone says, that homosexuality and the other LGBTQ perversions really are sinful, that law and order really are good things. All of these and other truths, we can and should and must proclaim them unashamedly, no matter how the political or cultural landscape shifts. And praise be to God, it appears to be making itself more hospitable to those truths. Second reason for hope is the gospel. Regardless of whether President Trump has been saved by it, and I don't believe he has, the gospel is still the power of the actual God who actually runs the world. And so we can and must take hope in the fact that we have the actual news, the actual message that saves people and is the power unto salvation from the God who governs President Trump, governs me, governs you. The third reason for hope is the church. It is rooted in the church. As such, the gospel is the church's power, no matter how this or any presidency goes. Pastor Michael and I are getting ready to move into a new building that we want to be there, we always say, for our grandkids. Yeah. President Trump will be far removed from the American landscape at the time our grandkids are hopefully celebrating 50 years at Christ the King in Fort Thomas. And at that point, that church will still be ministering the same gospel that has just as much power to save the lost and to sanctify and edify the believers. And so, praise be to God. May he give us many, many decades in a good and peaceful and orderly America. But regardless, he's already told us in his word, the church will still have the gospel and the gates of hell will not prevail against her.
Thank you for listening to the Current Reality Podcast. Feel free to send us some feedback at currentrealitypodcast@gmail.com. If you found this episode helpful, consider leaving us a positive review and sharing it with a friend. The Current Reality Podcast is brought to you by King's Domain in Cincinnati, Ohio.